Okay, here we go, guys. Roman numeral 2 in economics, chapter number 3. Today we're going to talk about prices and how they are affecting supply and demand. We're more going to talk about demand right now than we are supply. We'll get to that a little bit later on. But it's important for us to take what we learned yesterday and what we talked about with prices to understand that they are going to affect the supply and demand, and vice versa, where the prices are determined by both the buyers and the sellers. And we have to look at both sides of things. We can't just look at the seller and what they want to sell for, or the buyer and what they want to buy for. And so to get an idea of what that means, let's look first at the law of demand. The law of demand, in and of itself, is the act of buying. It can't just be limited to the willingness to buy. Oh man, I'd love to have a new computer, or I'd love to have a new car. The idea of buying is great for all of us, but to actually go out and buy is the difference between just wanting something and what we're classifying here as demand. So it's actually the act of buying. And if we look at the textbook definition, it's big and scary and everything like that. But the big idea here for the law of demand is that the lower the price that is charged for something, the more people want. And if you think about that with almost any good, whether it is donuts and the price is really low, then people are going to buy more, or whether it's iPhones, the price is really low and people are going to buy more. And the same thing is also true when we look at the opposite. When the price is really high, people generally buy less. It depends on a few factors that we'll talk about later, but that is a general rule that applies with demand. So it's important that you understand the intent behind this definition, not necessarily the word for word definition, but get an idea of how that works. So in order to understand demand, we need to look at a demand schedule. We learned about this last chapter and how to set these up and how to read them. And so hopefully this is a little bit more review, but it's going to list specific demand and prices that go along with that demand. And you can see here that a demand schedule has been clipped out of your book for candy bars. And if we were to go out and try to sell candy bars, this could be an example of the prices we charge and the quantity demanded at each of those prices. Again, if you take a look here, you can see that we have different prices at, or different quantities at different prices along the board. When we put that into a curve, you can see how that curve is represented by the demand schedule, and vice versa, how we can see each of the points that have been plotted on that curve represent what you see in that schedule. And again, it's important that you understand how to be able to read both of these to identify trends and be able to identify what is happening here when it comes to candy bars. So if we look at this particular curve, it illustrates what we see on the demand schedule, and it shows the demand for the product at any given price. We are not limited to just the 5 quantities that are given to us on the schedule. We can now look at an unlimited number of possibilities on this curve. When we're looking at demand, it's important to remember the catchphrase down and to the right, because every demand curve ought to move down and to the right if we set it up properly. If you have it going some other way, it's probably not set up correctly with your price on the left and the quantity down below. So demand curve moves down and to the right, and it's important that we get it set up this way. Now, sometimes we may have a change in the quantity demanded without changing a number of other factors. So this particular graph sees that we have a change in the quantity demanded. Now, it's easy explanation because the price has changed. When you look at the first point there at roughly 70 cents, people wanted 3,500 candy bars. If we raise our price up to $1.25, the demand is less. It goes down to, let's say, about 2,200 candy bars. And if our price goes up even higher to $1.60, we're looking at 2,000 candy bars. So our price has changed, which means it changes the quantity demanded. And that fits along with what we've just talked about with the law of demand. Now, getting a little more complicated is change in demand. Now, it's important as you look at this particular graph right here that there's one thing that has remained constant when it comes to change in demand. There is an increase in that demand, but no increase in price. See, the price still remains the same. We're right now at 70 cents per candy bar, but yet something has changed between demand 1, which is the red line, and demand 2, which is that orange line there. So what has happened? And there are a number of things that could happen here. But when we see an increase in demand, it is a shift to the right of the demand curve. We see there's an increase in demand, and people will demand more items at the same price. Price is not changed. On the other hand, we sometimes will see a decrease in demand. Exact opposite of what we saw with the increase. The curve shifts to the left, price is still the same, and now we see that people will demand less at the exact same price. So, important to take a note of the increase and decrease in demand and the shift that happens there. So why does this happen? Let's talk about some reasons. Why do we see a change in demand without a price change? It doesn't always seem to make sense, but when we talk about a couple of these things, maybe it will. As you look at change in income, so your change in income may affect what you're willing to buy or the quantity that you're willing to buy. I put up a picture here of Steph Curry. Of course, he is doing really well in the NBA right now. And I have to imagine that the change in income for him dramatically changed the things that he bought, or perhaps the quantity of things that he bought. As a college basketball player, I doubt he bought very many expensive suits. But knowing he was going to get drafted very high by the Golden State Warriors, he went out and he bought a couple of really nice suits. So therefore, the price of the suits did not change, but because of his income, his demand for those suits did change. And so we would call that a normal good. These are things that typically increase as people's income increases. So it's directly proportional to their income. So we would look at things like nice clothes or perhaps nice cars, maybe even look at expensive dinners. Those things would all be normal goods because they go up, the demand for those goes up as the income goes up. So on the opposite side of that, we've got inferior goods. Inferior goods are those that, as the income goes up, the demand goes down. So again, we're looking at Steph Curry here, and as his income goes up, I would have to imagine his desire and his demand for cheap Walmart shoes probably went down. Now, that's not too much of a knock against Walmart if you like Walmart shoes. However, we have to understand the context of this and look at those Walmart shoes as being inferior from what Steph Curry could probably go out and buy or get from any one of the malls in his area. So when we look at inferior goods, the demand decreases for that good when your income goes up. And we often look at secondhand clothing or used items as being inferior. But it's also important to understand that no good or service can definitely be called normal or inferior because that idea changes from person to person. Everybody may have a different opinion of what normal is or what inferior is. But we need to get a concept, an idea of what those generally mean. The second reason for a change in demand without a price change is perhaps there's a change in the price of a related good. The good we're examining has not changed, however, something related to it has. So often we will look at a substitute good. So a substitute good is a good that may be used in the place of others. So as the price of one good rises, consumers tend to buy more of the substitute. So perhaps we're going to look at something like cheeseburgers or hamburgers. You go to the store and all of a sudden something has happened and the price of hamburger has skyrocketed. So you're not going to buy hamburger anymore, and so you're not going to have cheeseburgers for dinner. Instead, you might find a good substitute. Perhaps you're going to look at hot dogs, or maybe you're going to look at chicken as a substitute. And if everybody does that, then the price of hot dogs and chicken has not changed. However, the demand will be changing because of the higher price of hamburger. So substitute goods can change the demand of some goods here because of what's going on. Okay, so it's important to look at substitute goods as well as complementary goods. These are goods that are usually purchased together, or oftentimes can encourage people to purchase together. You can take a look at Foxtrot here as the one guy is giving away free extra salty popcorn. The other guy is trying to sell lemonade, and the caption reads, "Think people will suspect that we're in cahoots." And the lemonade stand guy says maybe I should move down the street some. So clearly they're working together, giving away free popcorn and selling lemonade as a compliment, assuming that people, when they get thirsty, would love to buy some lemonade and it will help make them some money. So when we look at complementary goods, things that are usually purchased or used together, so as the price of one good rises, the demand for the other may rise as well, or may decrease. Excuse me, I had that backwards. As the price of one good rises, the demand for the other decreases as well. So if we're looking at perhaps hot dogs and hot dog buns, if all of a sudden we have the price on hot dogs goes way up through the roof, people are not going to have a need for hot dog buns, and therefore they're going to end up sitting on the shelf, and the demand goes down for the hot dog buns, even though we don't see any kind of change in price in those hot dog buns either. Now, this is about the point at which we ended in class, and so hopefully the rest of you that are joining us on Monday will get a good idea for what we talked about on Friday, and we'll be caught up, ready to go as we finish out Chapter 3 coming in the next week.